Joining us today is an internationally acclaimed environmental photojournalist and filmmaker specializing in human-animal conflict. Now, for more than 15 years, Gekoski has traveled the globe to capture our complex relationship with wildlife. It's great to have you on the show here, Aaron. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Paolo.
You know, from the Midlands of England to the middle of Quezon City, we really appreciate it's a tough commute. Really like having you here. First and foremost, your work that you do, it's a bit different compared to other nature photographers, wildlife photography, in the sense that some would rather feature the beauty of things, but you specialize in something a bit different. Human-animal conflict, the relationships all there. What drove you to that, first and foremost?
I was always fascinated by wildlife documentaries growing up, and David Attenborough was my hero, as he is with many people in the UK. So we all grew up watching his nature documentaries. And then when I was in my late 20s, I decided that I'd had enough of corporate life, and I was going to ditch it all, and I was going to run off to the wilds of Africa and be a wildlife filmmaker. So I went to wildlife filmmaking school in South Africa. And then the goal was really to go out there and to broadcast the beauty of the natural world and to share it with as many people as possible. However, when I started to explore a bit more, I saw that things weren't always as they seemed on those David Attenborough documentaries. And everywhere you turn, animals are being hammered. There are so many issues facing wildlife today that we are in the midst of a sixth mass extinction event. And to me, these stories were much more interesting. As soon as I finished my wildlife filmmaking course, I went to Mozambique. And the goal was to start diving as much as possible, to learn about underwater videography, and to perhaps make documentaries about sharks. And then I met two men who were making a documentary about shark finning. And this was something that I knew nothing about. But as I'm sure you're probably aware, up to 100 million sharks are killed every single year simply for their fins to make shark fin soup. And during the process of making this documentary, which took around 2 years, we were living in the shark finning camps with the fishermen. I started writing for different magazines. I started making documentaries. I started traveling around Africa.
Well, 20 years and still going strong. You actually did work for FHM, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
You did work for FHM talking about animals in Africa, and I don't understand how that happened. So can you tell me just about the audience you're trying to reach there?
Well, that's a very good point, because a lot of the time in this profession, you feel like you're just preaching to the converted. So there's no point me just writing for publications like National Geographic, where everyone already knows about shark finning. They understand about the plight of the shark. Where isn't it much more impactful to go out there and reach audiences who aren't aware of any of these issues?
And one of the things that actually reached a lot of audiences is the fact that you are, in fact, the 2024 Environmental Photographer of the Year. Congratulations on that achievement, by the way.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit more about that whole context and that whole experience and how you got into it?
Yeah, so wildlife tourism is an industry that I have been focusing on now for about 7 years. And it was actually when I first moved to Southeast Asia, and everywhere I was looking and traveling, I was seeing all of these zoos where the treatment of animals was pretty horrific. So wildlife tourism is such an interesting industry because, as you say, there are so many people. I'm sure everyone here now has been to a zoo at some point. They've been to an aquarium, they've been scuba diving. And what they don't realize a lot of the time is the impact that some of their decisions are making on these animals. So a lot of these animals, they might have been captured from the wild with their parents killed in the process. They are then smuggled illegally to zoos around the world where they might be mistreated. They're kept in cages that aren't big enough for them. They aren't given veterinary care. They aren't fed the right food. Others, like the image that you were talking about in Environmental Photographer of the Year, this focused on a place called Safari World in Thailand, where animals are forced into these boxing performances every single day. And this particular image was of an orangutan called Ning Nong. She's a 26-year-old female, and she has spent her entire life at Safari World. She's not there because she wants to be doing this. She's there because she is made to be. So I'm hoping through competitions like Environmental Photographer of the Year that people learn a lot more about these issues and ultimately don't visit places that abuse animals for profit.
Yeah, you know, the emotion that you put onto it, I think a lot of people might be taken aback by the fact that you're talking to them, talking about them, not as if they're animals, but as something, someone rather, with emotions, feelings, experiences. And that's actually a term that I've heard you use in the past, animal sentience. How would you explain that to someone who's skeptical about that particular term?
Yeah, so often we look at animals as just commodities for us to eat, for us to exploit, or for us to enjoy, perhaps in the form of wildlife tourism. But what most people don't know is that, as you touched upon, animals are sentient beings. They are intelligent. They might suffer from stress or depression when kept in wildlife tourism attractions. And when you go in, when you see orangutans, and you see that there's almost nothing left behind their eyes at some of these places. Their souls, their spirits have been completely broken to the point where they might just sit there. They might suffer from what's known as zoochosis, where animals just pace back and forth in zoos. If you've ever seen elephants which are swaying backwards and forwards, these are stress behaviors. This shows that the animals are not happy and that they are actually suffering from some kind of a mental breakdown.